Well, hello there, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Two Sons Podcast. I am your co-host here, Philip, and in today's episode, we are continuing our lovely journey through the land of Westeros as we continue to talk about season two of Game of Thrones: House of the Dragon. So obviously, again, it is just me for today. To be honest, I just haven't heard from my brother, so I'm not sure if we are going to be recording a little bit later, but if not, I will continue my mini series on House of the Dragon anyway. That way, you guys have a episode to watch and listen to next week. So he's probably busy with work and just life in general. So I don't mind, picking up the torch and providing you guys some nice comfort and leisure here at Two Sons Podcast. So what better way to do that by continuing our little lovely mini series that we have started with season two of House of the Dragon. So that is what I am going to be bringing you guys tonight. So it's probably going to be somewhat of a shorter episode. I basically just kind of talk for as long as I can until I run out of things to say. So we'll see how far this episode goes. But before we go into our lovely episode, I'll tell you guys a little bit about how I am doing. I'm doing pretty good. It's been a long day. I had work today with the shipment, and then I had to go to the dentist and get my teeth cleaned. So my mouth and my jaw is a little sore. Um, and other than that, I've been working, putting in the hours there. And I've been spending time with my mom because she came down to visit us for vacation. So I'm squeezing in some quality time with her when I can. And yeah. So otherwise, I've been doing pretty good. I think things are looking up. So it'll be nice if that trend continues. Um, so yeah, besides that, like I said, why don't we get into today's episode without further ado? So obviously, like I said, we're going to be discussing episode three of the House of the Dragon. Obviously, episode three and four have already came out at the time of this recording. So I'm a little behind, but we are going to be covering episode three. Um, Today, and then if I could remember this week, I will also record a reaction to episode four, and I will schedule that to release as well. So just check out the socials and stay up to date when the episodes do air. But like I said, tonight we're gonna be talking about just episode three because I don't want to take too much attention from an episode, so I'd rather just do an episode a week. It might not be as current as you guys would like it, but you're still going to get at least an episode a week regarding House of the Dragon. Yeah, but without further ado, like I said, let's get into it. So where we last left off in episode three, just bear with me as I start to remember what was in episode three to be precise. Episode three, there's a couple of different storylines going on. So I think the one we'll talk about first is what's going on with Damon Targaryen. So we see that at the end of episode two, he had left um, Dragonstone, and he was on his way to Harrenhal. Now, for those of you that don't know what Harrenhal is, we've seen it in Game of Thrones. Harrenhal is one of the largest castles in the region known as the Riverlands. It is of vital strategic importance, and if they are able to control such a large castle such as Harrenhal, they are able to garrison a very large force, and it gives them plenty of strategic movements and space in that region. And the Riverlands is one of the key regions that both Team Black and Team Green need to secure in order to win this Dance of the Dragons. So we see Damon flying on Caraxes, going to claim the castle, and we already see that from post wars and conflicts that Harrenhal is a shell of its former self. It is decrepit, it is decaying. There is ash and smoke and debris everywhere. Harrenhal was famously destroyed during Aegon's conquest when his dragon Balerion basically blasted the castle to smithereens because nobody thought that a castle could be melted by a dragon, and obviously Balerion proved them wrong. um, so we see that the castle is in somewhat of a state of disrepair, which is why we get that montage of Daemon walking through the castle and the halls of Harrenhal, and it's very run down, like I said, broken, just kind of disheveled. And we also know that besides just the castle being in disrepair and disarray, that the castle of Harrenhal also has a secret. A lot of people believe that the castle is cursed, and the families that are sworn, to that seat of power, end in either some sort of tragedy or disaster. So we see that this entire scene is excuse me, very spooky, to be honest. Like it's very unsettling. It's like, you don't know if somebody's gonna jump out from around the corner, pretty much. So we see that eventually Damon makes it to kind of like the main hall of Harrenhal, where he encounters some of House Strong. And again, we've obviously heard that name before because obviously Larys Strong, who is the Master of Whisperers to King Aegon II, is of that family. Rhaenyra's late lover, Sir Harwin Strong, was also of that family, and by turn, his sons, Jacaerys, Lucerys, and Joffrey, are also technically members of House Strong, even though they have the last name Velaryon. We all know that they are the bastard children of Sir Harwin Strong. Um, so we do, obviously know some notable members of that family. So we see that their family was given stewardship over Harrenhal, and were greeted by the Lord Paramount of the castle, known as Simon Strong, I believe. And he basically pledges allegiance and fealty to Queen Rhaenyra and Team Black. So we see that him and Daemon are able to come to terms, and he joins them for dinner. And obviously, they just get to talking about the situation in the Riverlands, and Daemon hoping to muster a force there, in order to take on Team Green. And we see, interestingly enough, that he is wanting to be called, like, Your Grace. And I mean, technically he is the king consort, but we do see that he is, wanting Simon Strong to call him Grace instead of, like, my lord. So that could be possibly foreshadowing. Maybe he wants to secure power for himself, or perhaps he just wants to be called Your Grace because technically he is the king consort. So we don't really know what Damon's up to. I mean, we know that you would think he's Team Black, but he is a little bit of an enigma. So we don't know if he's going to try to steal power for himself, if he's going to end up supporting Rhaenyra, or if he's just going to go completely AWOL. So he's kind of up in the air, and his journey through Harrenhal so far has shown that either he has some really deeply regretted issues, or just some things that he has not resolved internally. So, moving past this scene, we see him spend his first night at Harrenhal. I think, yeah, I think it's his first night. And this is where we get, like, some of the backgrounds of the fact that, this castle could possibly be haunted. And we see him wake up from sleep with somebody banging at his door. So, instinctively he grabs, his sword, and he starts exploring the hallways. And we eventually hear this sort of humming or singing, which brings him closer to a room. And in the room, we see a young Rhaenyra being played by Alcock again, which was fantastic to see her again because she was such a phenomenal actress as young Rhaenyra, actually singing a tune and basically exclaiming to Daemon that, "Oh, I'm always picking up after your messes." And we see that she's sewing on the severed head of just Jaehaerys Targaryen, which was the young kid that was murdered of the night of Blood and Cheese. So we see that he has some, unresolved issues with the fact that he basically helped in the murder of a child. And it's interesting how we see young Rhaenyra, not an older Rhaenyra, possibly referencing the fact that, he maybe still sees her as that young girl, or, maybe that's where he knows her the most, basically. Um, And after that, we see him, I think, basically being teleported outside to the courtyard where there's a weirwood tree. And he's just kind of standing in front of the weirwood tree. And this is where we see, one of the only times. I mean, we saw her originally when um, Simon Strong pledged his fealty, but we also see her again where he's, by by the character's name of Alice Rivers. And if any of you have read the book, obviously you know that her character holds some importance. and she basically just tells Damon, she's like, you're gonna die in this place, by the way, and then she just walks off. So Alice Rivers, I mean, we'll talk about her a little bit more next episode, in episode four, because she had more screen time in episode four. But she's a bastard, which is why she has the surname Rivers from the Riverlands. So we don't know if she's a bastard to House Strong. But she's kind of like the maester slash witch slash kind of strange enigma person of Harrenhal. And like I said, we get a more of a deeper approach to her in episode four, so we'll save that conversation for that episode. Um, but yeah, that basically ends his kind of like nighttime like sequence of kind of like what the hell is going on, you know? And then I think that's really all the scenes we get, I think, in that episode. I'm trying to remember, but yeah, I think that's the only scenes we get in that episode with Damon at Harrenhal. So that basically starts his journey and his story arc there. Now, forgive me as I continue to try to remember what was in that episode. Um, I think, sticking with Team Black, I mean, I think we'll return back to Dragonstone. And we see that, Rhaenyra's council, was still kind of in shambles, so to speak. We see that her lords, are getting very antsy and they want to, continue this war and they want to um, harp more on this war. They want to take action. And Rhaenyra is being very hesitant. She doesn't want to take any unnecessary action before, she needs to. And which is to be admired, because again, her, she's inheriting over like 80 years of peace, from her father. So before she tears the realm apart, she wants to make sure she exhausts every other option before she does so. And then this is where we see some characters, such as Rhaenys, stand out a little bit more. I mean, even though she's not the hand of the queen, she pretty much should be the hand of the queen, because she is able to keep a calm, steady head and basically kind of like steady the council, and remind them of who they are, and then who they're talking to, and basically put them in their place. Because even though they're on the same side, we can see some of that misogyny or like that, like scoffing at like oh we're following a woman around to war. What is she gonna know about war? And then she has this great line in episode three where she basically was like, I want you to all to remember that your queen is wearing the crown of my grandfather. He was one of the best Targaryen kings in Westerosi history. So think about that before you just continue to belittle or second guess everything she's saying. Um, which makes her such a beloved character, because she knows what it's like to be kind of like passed up upon because of her gender. So it's interesting to see her come to the defense of Rhaenyra and really steady the council. And not only that, but we also see um you know even her son, even Rhaenyra's son Jacaerys, and his betrothed, Bela, Damon's daughter, do the same thing, basically just make these like snippy remarks at the lords and stuff, to kind of defend, their queen and his mother. Um, and we see the whole time that Rhaenyra is kind of struggling. She doesn't know what she wants to do. She just buried the twins, and she doesn't know what's going to come next. She knows wars are brewing. She knows that it's only a matter of time, but she's trying to find every possible solution before she agrees to conflict. And this is where we see a shift in Rhaenyra because after taking counsel from her council, a numerous amount of times, she finally sits down and talks to Massaria. At first, she's looking like in the history books, maybe for something, and then she decides to um, open up the letter that Allison sent her at the very beginning of the season. And before she does that, actually, she ends up sending her children away. She ends up sending, I believe, Joffrey, Aegon the Third, and Viserys the Second uh, to the Vale to basically warden with Rhaenyra's cousin, the Lady Arryn, and they send Rhaena, Baela's sister, along with her. And we see that she's a little upset about this, because she feels like she's being casted aside because she doesn't have a dragon. But she's actually given a job of vital importance. I mean, not only keeping, the future heirs and the children of Rhaenyra safe and sound, but also keeping four dragon eggs safe as well. In case everything is lost in Dragonstone, they still have a future for dragons with these eggs. So it does give, Rhaena some importance. I think it makes her feel a little bit more validated that she is wanted and needed just as much as anybody else, even though she doesn't have a dragon. And we see a nice send off, with her and Rhaenyra, as well as her and her sister Bela. Um, and we see them, head off, for the Vale. So I wonder if we're going to see the Vale this season before it ends. We probably will because we saw the Lady Aaron in some of the trailers. So I wonder if we'll see their journey to the Vale. But after that, as Rhaenyra is looking at her children's toys, that's when she decides to open the letter from Allison. And I guess after reading the letter from Allison, she asks Massaria if she knows anything about Allison's movements, because she decided before she goes into all-out war and conflict and bloodshed, she is going to try to speak and reason with Allison one more time before all hell breaks loose. Because basically, before sides were chosen and like right at the end of season one, um, you know, Allison really did not want war. She didn't want conflict. She wanted Rhaenyra safe and sound and her family. Um, so Rhaenyra is under that impression that she still wants that. Um, and we see that Rhaenyra is able to sneak in with one of her bodyguards to King's Landing, dressed as a servant, of the Faith of the Seven, and she ends up infiltrating the temple where Allison frequents, and she ends up, coming up beside her, as she's on this little pew, and the two of them sit there and have a conversation. And at first, her goal is obviously to try and to find some sort of common ground, to end the conflict, peacefully. And we see that, Allison lets it slip that, in his dying moments, Viserys, wanted Aegon, to be ruler and not Rhaenyra. And we see that this actually shakes Rhaenyra, quite a bit because, she really thinks that in his dying breaths, her father gave up on her. And she's in that moment it looks like she's ready to accept that and she wants to know like what her father's final moments were, and Allison goes into explanation and talks about Aegon and the Song of Ice and Fire, and when she says that it clicks and she's like, wait, like he told you about the story about the Ice and Song of Fire, and then she realizes that Viserys was talking about Aegon the Conqueror's dream, and then when she realizes that and she says it out loud to Allison, Allison's like, what do you mean the conqueror? Like not Aegon his son, like the conqueror? And then she's basically like, oh shit, like did he actually not mean Aegon? And in that moment, you see realization for both Rhaenyra, in which her father never gave up on her and was just reiterating his dream because in that moment he thought he was talking to Rhaenyra, which gives her newfound hope and excitement. And then we see Allison being like, "Oh shit! Like everything that has been done these last couple of months has been for absolutely nothing." Um, and you see it in her face that she's like, "Oh my God!" Like he wasn't actually talking about his son. But then she doubles down and she's like, "No, it's too late. The damage is already done. Things are already in motion. There's no way to avoid this. Like no matter what you say, no matter what you do, there's no way to avoid this, like at all." Um, and unfortunately, we see Allison storm off, and that was the last ditch effort of possible peace. When it comes to the Dance of the Dragons and the line of succession. And then I'm assuming we see Rhaenyra eventually leave, and we see in episode four, she returns to Dragonstone. But again, we'll talk about that in episode four. Um, and I mean that's how the episode ends. So we don't really see too much out of Team Black. I think we see an interaction between Corlys and Rhaenys briefly when they're speaking about Rhaenyra and guiding her and figuring out what they could do to help her out, which again emphasizes the support that Rhaenys and Corlys feel for Rhaenyra, and then we even see Rhaenys give Rhaenyra some counsel earlier in the episode as they're burying the twins. Um, and if anything, I think when it comes to the Velaryons, I think Rhaenys is really the shining star, and she's the voice of the support for Rhaenyra. I mean, I think Corlys goes along with it because that's his wife pretty much. Um, but yeah, that's basically the situation that Team Black is in. So we see that Damon has, in a way, gone rogue. I mean, he's gone the Harrenhal because I mean that's what he was going to do for Rhaenyra anyway. but we don't know exactly where his intentions lie. So he's kind of up in the air. And as far as the rest of Team Black, the Black Council is like slowly falling apart. And they are antsy to take action, against, Team Green. Rhaenyra is trying one last ditch attempt to secure peace, before it turns into all out conflict. And we see that Rhaena and the rest of Rhaenyra's children are sent to the Vale, not only to ward and stay safe, away from war and conflict, but to also possibly secure the future for Team Black if everything goes wrong. Um, so we see that Team Black is playing it very cautious and putting all their eggs in one basket, so to speak. Um, Now, Team Green was kind of quiet this episode, to be completely honest. We see that Sir Christen Cole is kind of coming in to his new role as Hand of the King, as well as Lord Commander of the King's Guard. Um, but we see, unfortunately, with the death of one of the twins, as well as some defections of the King's Guard, to Rhaenyra, that King Aegon has kind of filled in the King's Guard with his own like personal friends and lackey. So we see, especially like when Sir Christian is walking down the staircase and the two King's Guard are kind of just standing there like twirling their swords. We definitely do see a lack of discipline and integrity in the King's Guard, and I'm sure that is going to be a problem that is probably going to plague them moving forward. But we see that at least in this time, the King's Guard is not being held up to the standard that it should be, which is ironic because when Sir Christian is walking down that staircase, he like waits until they basically stand at attention and they like man their post like they should. So he's still acting like the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, like he's the perfect example. Meanwhile, he's done everything that he should not have done, and he is far from the perfect example of a King's Guard. Um, so we see, that there is a, Green Council meeting, as Sir Kristen comes into the council chamber, and they're talking about what they should do. Because earlier in this episode there was a battle called the Battle of the Burning Mill, between House Blackwood and House Bracken, which are two houses in the Riverlands. They've been fighting for centuries, and there was a huge, heavy casualty loss on both sides type of battle. Um, in the Riverlands. And like I said, we see that in the beginning of the episode. And, so they're discussing that. And, the Green Council is basically, between the efforts of, Aemon and Sir Christian, they believe that they should start taking a host and marching into the Riverlands. They are going to secure, the other houses in the Crown Lands, basically around King's Landing, turn them to, Team Green and King Aegon's side and bolster their host and start marching into the Riverlands to go basically down to Harrenhal. So, along the way, they're going to subdue like, smaller houses of the Riverlands, bring them to Team Green's side. That way, by the time they reach Harrenhal, they have a mighty host to besiege the castle. So obviously, we see that Aegon is, antsy for war. He wants to strike back. He sees, the victory of, you could argue the Pithric victory of House Bracken in the Battle of the Burning Mill as a win for Team Green. And he wants, more blood, basically. Like, he wants to go to war. So of course there are the members of the council that are like, dissuading from it. But overall, the plan is set in motion, and Sir Kristen is set to leave at, a mighty Targaryen host and head down to the Riverlands. Um, so after that, we see briefly in the courtyard, before Sir Kristen is set to head out, that we see that Allison Hightower's brother, I believe Sir Gwen or Gwaine Hightower, has made it from Old Town and has came into King's Landing. So we see right away that he's kind of giving like, Sir Kristen Cole shit, because he's like a low-born, like Dornish commoner, and the fact that he went from that all the way to Hand of the King is really impressive for a man of his stature. So we see that Sir Gawain is kind of this like uptight, like basically noble prick kind of. Um, but nonetheless, he offers his services to Sir Kristen and agrees to ride out to him into battle, basically. So before he leaves, Cole asks Allison for her blessing, and we see that she gives him his blessing, which it's kind of a cringe scene because I don't think she really wanted to. So it was kind of more like an eye roll, like here, just take it and leave me alone. And then he was kind of like, all right, he's like, I got the queen's favor. Um, so they kind of have an interesting relationship. I think for them, it's just all like fun and games. I don't think it's anything serious. I mean, at least to her, it doesn't seem like anything serious, but he might think he has something going there. But he doesn't. And then yeah, and then we see the host start to march out, and then I'm trying to think. I think it's that episode. We might get a brief interaction between Allison and Helena, as they're, continuing to talk about, Jaharis and, kind of what's going on. And then finally Helena is like, I forgive you for what you were doing that night, which led to the death of my son. So they kind of share a nice little moment, kind of sheds a little bit more light on Helena's character, and Allison's character, and definitely kind of shows you their relationship and their bond that they have. Um, Not only that, but we do see that Aegon is still antsy about going to war. Like he wants to march out where with Sir Kristen, and the host. Like he wants to take his dragon Sunfire and he wants to go into the Riverlands too. And we see that he is suiting up, for battle, in his dragon armor. And we see that's when Sir, Lara Strong comes in and basically persuades him not to, because he's basically saying that there's been some gossiping, and they're like, some people are saying that the king should stay here, other people are saying that he should go, because then if he goes, then his mother could take over and become ruler, of Westeros and King's Landing. So it kind of gets in Aegon's head, and basically, Aegon is telling Larys to silence all these whispers or all these rumors. And then in that moment, he realizes that Laris could be a very good master of whispers, for his council, and he basically names Laris Strong in that moment his master of whispers. And because of that conversation, it actually persuades Aegon to not fly out and to stay in King's Landing another day, which we will see later, because we see later on, because he stayed in King's Landing, that he goes out, onto the town, he goes, with his buddies, for a drink, and he takes one of the squires out so he could, get drunk and go to a brothel, to have sex for the very first time. So we see that, they do this, then they go to a brothel, and they're looking for a woman, and then that's when Aegon finds Aemon, with one of the escorts, basically. And this is where Aegon is super drunk and is just constantly making fun of his brother and laughing and pointing and whatever. And we see Aemon get very upset and very annoyed, and he chooses just to leave and be the bigger person and just kind of walks out. But because of this interaction, there will probably be repercussions, um, in the following episode that we'll talk about. But we see that obviously the relationship is not as lovey-dovey as it was. I mean, we kind of see that a little bit in season one, especially towards the end of the season. But we see even as they've grown up, and now that there's more looming on the horizon, they're not exactly on the same page. Like I said, we'll see a lot more of that next week, when I talk about episode 4. Finally, to round out this episode, honestly, I think when it comes to Team Green, we see Sir Kristen Cole and his host, out marching, and they end up heading to a tree line, and he's basically trying to stop Sir Gawain Hightower and his men from going to stay at an inn, down, a couple of miles down, instead of camping with the rest of the men. And that's when Sir Kristen Cole notices that they're not alone, and he knows that they're not alone because in the distance he could see Bela riding Moondancer as she is patrolling the area of King Landing and around the Bay of Dragons and Blackwater Bay, or whatever it's called. Um, and because they've been spotted, him and the party start booking it for the trees. And when Bela sees this, she starts to swoop down on Moondancer. And we don't know exactly what she was going to do. We don't know if she was going to attack or if she just was going to scare them. But eventually, Sir Kristen and his company make it to the tree line, and unfortunately, Bela cannot see them anymore, and she lets them go. And then this is obviously where she comes to report back, over the fact that Sir Kristen and his company are on the march and they're heading to the Riverlands, and whatnot. And this is how Team Black knows of their movements, basically. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much, the end of the episode. I mean, obviously the end of the episode was, Rhaenyra and Allison's conversation, but I mean, as for a whole, that is pretty much the end of the episode. So I think I'll give this episode, honestly, a solid probably 9 out of 10. So I know the conversation between Rhaenyra and Allison wasn't actually in the books, and I don't know how I feel about it. I don't know if it was a waste of screen time or if it was really well done. I mean, I think both, Emma Darcy and Olivia Cook did phenomenal in that scene with each other, and it's always nice seeing the two of them on screen together. But as for like the importance of the story or if it meant anything to the story, I don't think it took anything away, but I don't think it added anything. So I think I'm kind of giving it a point off just for that. But again, still solid 9 out of 10. I mean, again, we're setting up the eventual first battle, the battle at Rook's Rest, which we'll see in episode 4. So again, just setting up, more of the dance. And I mean, if anything, this season was going to do that. I mean, I think we all knew going into it that this season was going to show some of the battles, but then also set up the majority of the Dance of the Dragons. So again, another solid episode. I mean, I am really excited to talk about episode 4 because that one was amazing. And we're gonna have a lot of great discussion with that. But that is going to do it for our episodes. I mean, yeah, like I said, I mean, I would give it a solid 9 out of 10 suns. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. Definitely a well-rounded episode once again. And yeah, like I said, that is going to do it for today's episode. So thank you guys so much for coming out to another wonderful episode of a Two Sons podcast. I've been your co-host Philip, and we have just talked about and discussed episode 3 of season 2 of House of the Dragon. So if you guys are wondering where you could find more of this delicious content and content like this, and did you guys know I've already done 2 episodes on this? And if you haven't watched that, let me tell you where you can watch it. You can find us on Spotify and YouTube, all under Two Sons Podcast. That's with an O, not a U, because we are two brothers. You can also find us on Instagram, Facebook, X, formerly known as Twitter, all under Two Sons Podcast. Again, that is with an O, not a U, because we are two brothers. And you can also find us on TikTok at Two Sons YouTube. And like I said, we will post on the socials and notify you guys when this episode will become available. This episode will become available on Monday. So you guys will have a nice House of the Dragon episode to open up your week to. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to that. But with that being said, now that all the good podcasting stuff is out of the way, and I've told you where you can find us and where you want to view us, um, I will leave you all with whenever you listen to this podcast, whether you're watching or you're listening to it, I hope you have an amazing morning, amazing afternoon, amazing evening, and an amazing night. Whenever you're listening to this, just please be safe. Do not do anything stupid. Stay hydrated. Eat your fruits and veggies, and just love yourself because the only person that can love you is you. And with that being said, guys, thank you for coming out to another episode of Two Sons Podcast. I've been your co-host, Philip, and I hope you all have a wonderful day and goodbye for now.